The cardboard boxes stacked along my living room wall felt less like storage and more like gravestones marking the end of my marriage. I sat on the floor with my back pressed against a cold radiator, the divorce decree in one hand and my phone in the other. The screen said 3:47 p.m., exactly 1 hour since Judge Clarissa Hale slammed his gavel and closed the book on what I'd once believed was 22 years of love. My phone buzzed. Selena's name flashed across the screen. Against every bit of common sense, I opened her message. Hope you enjoy your pathetic little studio apartment, Theo. Nathaniel just moved his grand piano into your old music room. The movers said it's worth more than you'll make in 5 years. Oh, and we're turning your practice space into his cigar lounge. You know, for someone who actually matters. Another buzz followed, a photo this time. Nathaniel stood in my old office, his Harvard diploma hanging exactly where my grandfather Maxwell's war medals once were. His smirk wasn't a smile. It was the kind of expression predators wear when they've already decided you're the meal. Then came another message. You'll die poor and alone, just like your grandfather. At least he had his secrets to keep him company in that nursing home. What do you have? A violin and a fantasy of talent? I almost threw the phone across the room. My arm was halfway through the motion when it rang again, this time an actual call. I froze. Where a phone number should have been, the screen showed a strange line of zeros ending in a single one. It rang 3 times, then 4, then 5. On the 6th, my thumb acted on instinct and answered. Adrian Maxwell Carter? The voice was male, clipped, and precise. Each word sounded like it had been measured and loaded like a bullet. Who's this? My voice cracked, heavy with everything I'd been swallowing all day. Mr. Carter, this is Colonel Victor Langford, Pentagon Estate Recovery Division. I need you to listen carefully. He paused. Your grandfather, Staff Sergeant Maxwell Carter, completed a classified mission in Cambodia in 1964. Codename, Night Music. My grandfather was a supply sergeant in Vietnam, I said automatically. He played piano at officer clubs. It was the same story my dad, Simon, had told me my whole life. That was his cover, Mr. Carter, the colonel replied. He was actually a cryptography specialist with the 5th Special Forces Group. That mission remained classified for 60 years. As of midnight last night, that classification expired. I got to my feet, knees unsteady. What are you saying? Your grandfather recovered something in the Cambodian jungle, something that has gained substantial value over the decades. He never claimed his compensation because of the operation's secrecy. Adjusted for interest and inflation, that compensation now totals approximately $156 million. The phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a loud crack. I could still hear Langford's voice, faint and metallic through the speaker. I grabbed it again, shaking. That's insane, I said. My grandfather died in a state nursing home. My parents had to remortgage the house to pay for him. Staff Sergeant Carter made a choice, Langford said. He kept silent, to protect his family and his country. But he also left instructions. The funds can only go to his direct descendant, and only if certain conditions are met. What conditions? You need to come to Washington immediately. There's a Delta flight leaving O'Hare in 3 hours. A first-class ticket has already been purchased in your name. Window seat, 14I. Your grandfather insisted that detail be included in his file. I hesitated. How did you even know to call me right after my divorce? There was a short silence. Then, your grandfather's orders were clear. We were to contact you on the day you lost everything. His exact words were, when my grandson has nothing left to lose, give him everything I couldn't claim. I stared at the wall. He's been dead 35 years. How could he possibly know? Maxwell Carter understood patterns, Mr. Carter. He was gifted at predicting outcomes. It's why he was so valuable to military intelligence. The colonel's tone hardened. The question now is whether you're ready to learn what he knew. The clock started the moment I called. You have 72 hours to finish what your grandfather began, or the inheritance transfers to the Department of Defense. Through the window, Lake Michigan looked gray and restless, like my grandfather's eyes when he used to stare off into some memory he never spoke about. Selena's message echoed in my head, die poor and alone. I pictured Nathaniel standing in my house like he owned it. Colonel Langford, I said quietly, what exactly did my grandfather find out there in that jungle? The answer to that question is worth $156 million, he replied. Be at the Pentagon tomorrow at 0800 hours sharp. Bring your grandfather's journal, the one filled with musical notes. You still have it, don't you? My eyes went to the one box I'd refused to let Selena touch during the divorce. The label read Grandpa Maxwell's Things, my mother's handwriting. Yes, I said. I still have it. Good, the colonel said. One more thing, Mr. Carter, about your ex-wife's new companion, Nathaniel Hawke. His grandfather, Charles Hawke, was a defense contractor back in 1964, Colonel Langford said. That's not coincidence, Mr. Carter. Nothing in your life right now is coincidence. Your grandfather saw this coming decades ago. Then the line went dead. I stood there in silence, my empty apartment closing in around me, the last scraps of a marriage scattered across the floor, holding a phone that had just reached into a past I didn't even know belonged to me. Outside, Chicago's skyline cut through the fading light, a jagged silhouette against a bruised gray sky. Somewhere out there, Selena was probably clinking glasses in my old house, celebrating her fresh start with a man whose family might be tied to the same secrets my grandfather carried to his grave. I went to the box labeled Grandpa Maxwell's Things and lifted out his old leather journal. The pages were fragile, yellowed at the edges, filled with musical notes I'd been playing on my violin since I was a kid. For the first time, I noticed something I'd somehow missed all these years. In the corner of the first page, written in faint pencil, barely visible unless I tilted it toward the light, were 5 words, for Adrian, when everything ends. 3 months before that call turned my life upside down, I'd stood on the stage at Symphony Center, finishing the final movement of Brahms's Concerto in D major. The crowd was on its feet, 2,000 people cheering. But in the third row, Selena sat motionless, hands folded neatly in her lap. She wasn't clapping. That should have been the first sign. At 47, my life had fallen into a rhythm as steady as a metronome. Every morning, I woke at 6 in our Lake Forest mansion, ran scales in my soundproof studio, while Selena stretched through her yoga routine on the terrace overlooking the pool. The house sprawled across 2 acres of perfect landscaping, every room curated to match Selena's design taste and my ability to fund it. We bought it 15 years earlier, right after the Chicago Symphony made me first-chair violin. Back then, she still came to my performances, still meant it when she said she loved watching my hands move across the strings. My mother, Elaine, had walked through the house at our housewarming, her weathered fingers brushing over the marble countertops. Your grandfather would be so proud, she'd said softly. Maxwell always told me music would take you places he never could go. By then, Grandpa Maxwell had been gone 12 years, but his presence still hung over our family like a melody you can't quite forget. My dad, Simon, kept his photo on the mantel, a young soldier in uniform, eyes sharp and unyielding. Beside it sat his Bronze Star, though none of us knew exactly what he'd done to earn it. He came back different, my father would say after his 3rd beer at family dinners. Spent 6 months in Cambodia before they even listed his deployment in Vietnam. Never spoke a word about it. Just sat at that piano, playing like he was trying to drown out something only he could hear. I'd inherited his gift for music, but not his love for jazz. Where he thrived in smoky bars, improvising wild and free, I found comfort in structure and precision. Classical music made sense to me. Every note written, every phrase deliberate, predictable, safe. That discipline was what first drew Selena to me. We met at a charity gala 23 years ago. She leaned in close while we danced and whispered, "You're not like the other men here. These hedge fund types think money is music. You create something eternal." Back then, she worked for a small design firm, young, ambitious, wearing a borrowed dress and a string of fake pearls that somehow made her even more beautiful. I was 32, she 29, and when she looked at me that night, I felt like Brahms himself. For the first 10 years, our marriage was good. She transformed every apartment we lived in, each one more refined as my career climbed. When we finally bought the Lake Forest house, she quit her job, saying she wanted to dedicate herself to making our life something beautiful. I didn't argue. I was busy, 6 hours of practice a day, 3 performances a week, weekends teaching masterclasses at Northwestern. We talked about having kids, but never acted on it. There was always another tour, another remodel, another excuse to wait. The drift started quietly, like a violin just slightly out of tune. Selena joined the country club, started having long lunches with women whose husbands managed hedge funds or tech startups. She came home talking about vacation homes in Aspen, yachts on Lake Geneva, and private jets to Art Basel. One evening, she looked up from her phone and said, "Did you know Nathaniel Hawke just bought a Basquiat? 23 million for a single painting." That was the first time I heard his name. The man who would eventually tear everything apart. She'd been hired to redesign Nathaniel's penthouse in Lincoln Park, a project she took without even mentioning it to me. "It's just one client," she said when I found out. "His money spends like anyone else's." But it didn't. His money came with attention, compliments, subtle comparisons that chipped away at me piece by piece. Nathaniel was 6'2" to my 5'9", a Harvard MBA to my Juilliard degree. He made $40 million the previous year. I made a little over $300,000. At a dinner party we couldn't politely decline, Nathaniel clapped a hand on Selena's shoulder and said, "Your husband's quite the talent. Must be fascinating living with an artist." The way he said artist made it sound like a hobby, something charming but ultimately meaningless. Selena laughed, really laughed, the kind of genuine, effortless laugh I hadn't heard in months. And that sound, more than anything, told me something was slipping away. That was 6 months ago. The Vienna tour that spring was supposed to be my victory lap, 3 weeks performing with the Vienna Philharmonic. Vienna was supposed to be a triumph. Instead, it became the final movement of my marriage. While I played Mozart on stage at the Musikverein, Selena was composing a different kind of duet in Nathaniel Hawke's penthouse. My nephew Victor was the one who found out, who caught them in an embrace that shattered everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the woman who once swore my music was all the wealth she'd ever need. His FaceTime call came at 2 a.m, Vienna time. I was sitting in my hotel room at the Imperial, bow still in hand, reviewing notes for the next day's rehearsal. His face filled my screen, pale and nervous, looking more like a scared teenager than the 23-year-old he was. "Uncle Theo, I need to tell you something," he said. His voice cracked the same way it had the night he called me after his father's funeral. "I saw Aunt Selena tonight," he went on, "at Mr. Hawke's office building. She's redesigning his offices too," I said, setting down my violin. "She mentioned something about expanding the project." Victor shook his head. "It was midnight, Uncle Theo. The whole building was dark except for the penthouse. They were on the balcony, and they were. God, I don't even know how to say this." My stomach tightened. "Just say it." "They weren't looking at fabric samples." The bow slipped from my hand and clattered against the music stand. "What exactly did you see?" "They were kissing," he said quietly. "Like really kissing. Her dress was not exactly on." "I'm sorry. I didn't want to believe it either. I took pictures because I knew you wouldn't without proof." Seconds later, my phone lit up with images I'll never forget. Selena pressed against the glass balcony railing, Nathaniel's hands tangled in her hair, her red dress half unzipped. Behind them, the Chicago skyline sparkled like it was celebrating my humiliation. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m., the same time she'd texted me that she was going to bed early with a headache. That night, I played my concert perfectly, every note in place, my fingers moving on autopilot while my mind replayed those images. The critics called the performance technically flawless but emotionally detached. Fitting words for a man whose life had just been revealed as an illusion. 3 days later, I was back in Chicago, standing in the kitchen facing her. She was humming Vivaldi's Spring, dressed immaculately, wearing a new pair of diamond earrings I didn't recognize. "Nice earrings," I said, setting my violin case on the counter with careful control. She touched them without thinking. "Thank you. A bonus from the Hawk project." "Must be quite a project," I said, working past midnight and getting paid in jewelry. Her face shifted through a whole score of expressions: shock, calculation, defiance, and finally, cold resolve. "You know," she said flatly. "Victor saw you," I replied. "He works in Nathaniel's building, remember? Or did you forget about family while you were undressing for your client?" She set her coffee down with deliberate calm. "I wasn't going to insult you by denying it." "How generous of you." "You want an apology?" she asked. "Fine. I'm sorry you found out this way. But I'm not sorry it happened." She stood, smoothing her skirt, those same hands that once traced my jaw after a standing ovation. "Do you know what it's like to be married to a man who loves dead composers more than living people? You spend 6 hours a day with your violin, Theo." 6 hours. Nathaniel spends that time building empires. I'm a musician, I said. It's who I am. It's what you said you loved about me. I was 29, she said, her voice sharp. I thought passion for art meant passion for life. But you don't live, Theo. You perform. Even our marriage became a recital, the same movements over and over again. Nathaniel shows me new worlds. Last week we flew to Monaco for lunch. For lunch. I repeated. You threw away 22 years for lunch in Monaco. She smiled faintly. No, I threw it away for someone who makes me feel alive. You want to know the difference between you and Nathaniel? She asked. When he walks into a room, people notice. When you walk in, they appreciate your talent, but nobody fears you. Nobody needs you. Nobody's life changes because Adrian Carter exists. Except yours, I shot back. My money changed your life plenty. She laughed, bitter, cutting. Your money? Theo, Nathaniel makes what you earn in a year before lunch. That house you're so proud of? His wine cellar is worth more. You're a relic playing relics for other relics. The world's moved on, and you're still standing on a stage worshipping ghosts. Her lawyer was her father's golf buddy, of course. The divorce papers were ready before I'd even processed the betrayal. Illinois law favored the non-working spouse, especially one who'd sacrificed her career for the marriage. She wanted the house, half my retirement accounts, lifetime alimony, and maintenance of her established lifestyle. Her lawyer even had the nerve to say, "You'll keep your violin, Mr. Carter. And one vehicle. Mrs. Carter is being very reasonable." My mother, Elaine, cried when I told her. That woman never deserved you, she said. My father, Simon, was blunt as always. Maxwell lost everything too, you know. Came back from the war to find his first wife had sold the family farm and run off with another man. Rebuilt from nothing. And died with nothing, I reminded him. He died with dignity, my father said quietly. Sometimes that's all a man gets to keep. By the time the Pentagon came into view, rising out of the Virginia morning like a massive stone machine, I'd replayed every one of those words. I'd taken the red-eye from Chicago, my grandfather's journal wrapped in a towel inside my backpack, too valuable to risk in checked baggage. The Uber driver, a fellow veteran, whistled low when I told him the destination. Pentagon at dawn, huh? You military? My grandfather was, I said. Staff Sergeant Maxwell Carter. Must have been quite a man, getting you a summons like that, he said. If only he knew. On the flight, I'd read and reread Maxwell's journal, noticing patterns I'd somehow missed my entire life. The musical compositions weren't random at all. Each composition had a date, and every date lined up with a military operation in Southeast Asia. But the real secrets weren't in the notes. They were scribbled in the margins, tiny markings that looked like musical dynamics, but didn't match anything in standard notation. Colonel Victor Langford met me at the security checkpoint. His uniform was so crisp it could have cut paper. He was younger than I'd pictured, maybe 50, and stood with the kind of posture that made me straighten up without thinking. Mr. Carter, thank you for coming, he said, his handshake firm but brief. Before we continue, I need to verify your identity, something beyond documents. Tell me about your grandfather's piano. It was a 1947 Baldwin Spinet, mahogany finish, I answered. He bought it from a pawn shop in Raleigh right after the war. There was a cigarette burn on middle C from the previous owner. Langford nodded slightly. And what did he call his Sunday night performances at the veterans' home? I couldn't help but smile. Church for the unchurched, I said. He always said music was the only religion that never lied. Follow me, he said. We took an elevator down 3 levels underground, each checkpoint more serious than the last. Finally, we stepped into a windowless room, lit by fluorescent bulbs, a metal table in the center piled with file boxes. Your grandfather's real service record, Langford said, opening the first box. What you're about to hear has been classified above top secret. Even now, some details must stay redacted. He laid out photographs. Maxwell, young and sharp-eyed, standing in jungle fatigues beside men whose faces were blacked out. Behind them, the wreckage of a small aircraft. Operation Night Music. February 1964, he explained. Your grandfather's unit was deployed into Cambodia to investigate a downed Soviet reconnaissance plane. Officially, there were no Soviets in Cambodia. And officially, we weren't there either. What did they find? I asked. The wreck carried an early computer prototype designed to encode nuclear launch sequences. But the real prize wasn't the tech. He slid another photo across the table. The pilot, Anton Petrov, survived the crash. Barely. Your grandfather spoke enough Russian to communicate with him. Langford opened a transcript, half of it blacked out. Petrov knew he was dying. He gave your grandfather information about Swiss bank accounts used to pay double agents. Account numbers, access codes, everything. Then he handed me another photo, Maxwell holding a metal briefcase. Your grandfather memorized the data before turning over the case, Langford said. He could have claimed that money anytime. $22 million in 1964. Imagine what that's worth now. Why didn't he? I asked. Because doing so would have exposed the operation. People would have died. He chose silence. But he encoded everything in his music. The Pentagon owed him compensation, but he refused to claim it, said it would raise too many questions and put his family at risk. Langford exhaled slowly. Now the classification limits expired. With 60 years of interest and government penalty multipliers, the total stands at $156 million. But your grandfather set conditions. He handed me a sealed envelope, my name written on it in Maxwell's shaky handwriting. He said it could only be opened by his grandson, once that grandson had, quote, lost everything material and could gain everything essential. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were 3 handwritten pages. Adrian, if you're reading this, your marriage has ended, and you've lost what you once thought was security. I know this because patterns repeat through generations. I saw your father's romantic nature in you. You love completely, and that means you can be hurt completely. The music I left behind holds more than melody. Each piece maps coordinates. Each rhythm marks a sequence. In Baltimore, Storage Unit 447, paid through 2087, you'll find what I couldn't destroy and couldn't claim. The Pentagon money is yours, but the Baltimore contents are a choice, truth or comfort. The Swiss accounts still exist, scrubbed by time, but dirty in origin. The names tied to them are powerful, and one will matter to you personally. You have 72 hours from when Langford contacted you. If you don't claim it, everything defaults to defense. If you do, you'll hold the power to expose or preserve the lies history was built on. Choose wisely. Music, like truth, echoes across generations. Your grandfather, Maxwell. The Baltimore storage facility looked abandoned, brick walls coated with grime and graffiti, but the keypad worked the moment I punched in the code hidden in the third movement of Maxwell's Autumn Fugue, 196402228. The date of the mission combined with his service number. Unit 447 was tucked at the end of a long, musty corridor. The air smelled of rust and old paper. The lock turned easily, and inside, there was only a single olive-green filing cabinet. On top of it sat a chessboard frozen mid-game. The position was familiar immediately, the Budapest Gambit. The same opening Maxwell had taught me when I was 8. The Gambit means sacrifice, he'd said then. You give up material to gain position. When I opened the top drawer of the cabinet, I found another safety deposit box key. This one belonged to Baltimore First National. Under it sat a worn leather portfolio stuffed with papers that made my hands tremble. Inside were photocopies of Swiss bank statements from 1964 to 1970, showing deposits funneled from American defense contractors straight to Soviet intelligence. The numbers were enormous, but the names were worse. Hawk Industries appeared 17 times. Charles Hawk, Roland's grandfather, had sold faulty helicopter parts to the U.S. Army while secretly funding Soviet operations in Cambodia. Dozens of American soldiers died in crashes caused by mechanical failures he knew about and ignored. His profit margin on those parts? 43%. The blood money hidden in Swiss accounts totaled $22 million. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Carter? The voice was familiar, but not right. This is Roland Hawk. I hear you've been to Washington. How would you know that? The same way I knew your wife could be tempted by someone offering her more, he said. The same way my family's always known what Maxwell Carter brought back from that jungle. We've been watching your bloodline for 60 years, waiting for one of you to try claiming what was never yours. Your grandfather was a war profiteer who killed American soldiers. My grandfather was a businessman who saw war as another market. He continued, calm and confident. Yours was a thief who stole government property. He recorded the truth, I said. Truth, he laughed quietly, is whatever the powerful decide it is, Carter. So here's my offer. Take the Pentagon's payout and disappear. Leave Baltimore tonight. Walk away from those documents, and you'll never have to think about Selena or me again. Or keep pushing, and you'll find out what real loss feels like. You're threatening me? I'm offering the same deal your grandfather got. Silence and safety, or truth and consequences. He chose silence. Be smarter. The line went dead. I stood in that storage unit surrounded by the evidence of crimes that built one of America's great fortunes, and I made my choice. I called Marcus, my cousin, an investigative journalist. Marcus, clear your schedule, I said. I've got the story that'll define your career. The vault at Baltimore First National opened with a slow, ceremonial hum. The deposit box was bigger than I expected. Inside were the original documents, and more. Reel-to-reel tapes labeled Kosloff Confession and a second set of ledgers tracking where the Swiss money went after 1970. Roland's father had inherited the accounts, and Roland took control in 2010. But Maxwell had left one last twist. At the bottom of the box lay a single handwritten sheet of music titled Redemption Suite. When I hummed the tune, I realized it wasn't just music, it was an encryption of account passwords. My grandfather hadn't just recorded the crimes. He'd kept access to the money itself. I spent the next 24 hours with Marcus and a team of forensic accountants from his paper. The accounts were real and active, $87 million in total. Technically clean now, but built on the bones of the dead. We go to print tomorrow, Marcus said. This will take down Hawk Industries. And Selena with it. She tied her future to Roland, I said. You having second thoughts? I thought of Maxwell, choosing silence to protect the family, and then of the young names on those casualty lists, men who died because Charles Hawk chose profit over life. No second thoughts, I said, but we do it smart. We publish the historical documents first. Let the public connect the dots. And that money, the Swiss accounts, it doesn't go to me. It goes into a trust for the families of the soldiers who died in those crashes between 1964 and 1970. All of it. Every cent. The Pentagon payout's enough for me. The blood money goes back to those it was stolen from. Marcus smiled. Your grandfather would be proud. Maybe. Or maybe he'd think I'm a fool for picking truth over safety. What do you think he'd say? I looked at the sheet music again, at Maxwell's careful handwriting, the notes like fingerprints of a man who couldn't stop the horror but refused to let it vanish. He'd say the music was worth playing, even if no one was ready to hear it. The Washington Post ran Marcus's story that Tuesday, Blood Money, how defense contractor fraud funded enemy operations in Vietnam. By noon, Hawk Industries stock had collapsed 40%. By market close, Roland Hawk was under federal investigation for inherited fraud and tax evasion tied to those Swiss accounts. I watched the coverage from my new office, a converted brownstone in Lincoln Park. The sign outside read the Maxwell Carter Foundation for Veterans Families. The Pentagon funds had cleared the week before. $156 million. Clean. Legal. Mine. But I kept thinking about those helicopter reports. The faces of 19-year-old soldiers who never came home because someone decided their lives were worth less than profit. Selena called 17 times that first day. I picked up on the 18th. Theo, Roland's been arrested. The FBI took everything. The house, the accounts, even my car. They're saying it's all proceeds of crime. I have nothing. You have what you chose, I said. I made a mistake. I see it now. Roland used me, just like his grandfather used those soldiers. I'm staying with my sister in Naperville. In her basement. Me, in a basement. Selena, I asked quietly, what do you want from me? I want to come home. That house isn't my home anymore. The bank took the house after Nathaniel's assets were frozen and the payments stopped. I bought it back at auction a month ago. You bought our house? She asked. I bought a house, I said. My Uncle Bernard and Aunt Dolores live there now. They lost their home to medical bills. Now they've got a place to spend their last years in peace. Feels like a better use of space than Nathaniel's cigar lounge ever was. She started crying. Hard, messy crying that once would have torn me apart. What am I supposed to do now, she asked. The same thing I did, I told her. Start over. The only difference is you chose how yours ended. Mine got written for me. 6 months later, I was back at Symphony Center, standing on stage to debut Redemption Suite. The piece Maxwell wrote but never performed. The audience had no idea they were listening to Swiss bank passwords turned into melody, or how tragedy had been reshaped into music. My mother, Elaine, sat in the front row. Tears streamed down her face during the Adagio, the section that carried the names of every soldier who died in an Hawk-built helicopter. The trust fund had already paid out $12 million to Gold Star families. Marcus won a Pulitzer for his reporting. Hawk Industries collapsed under the lawsuits, filing for bankruptcy. Nathaniel ended up with 7 years in federal prison for tax evasion, the only charge they could prove on crimes he'd inherited. Selena divorced him soon after, then remarried. A practical choice, probably more fitting than love ever was for her. My sister Vanessa asked me one day if I regretted any of it. Which part? I asked. Exposing Nathaniel or losing Selena? Either. Both, she said. You could have taken the money and stayed quiet. Maxwell did. Maxwell didn't have that choice, I said. Back then, the world wasn't ready to hear the truth. He held on to those secrets like seeds, waiting for someone else to plant them. I just happened to inherit his soil. The real inheritance wasn't the money, though that certainly changed life in practical ways. It was realizing Maxwell's silence hadn't been cowardice. It was strategy. He'd played a long game, setting the board so his grandson could finally make the moves he couldn't. I live quietly now, a 2-bedroom condo a short walk from Symphony Hall. I still practice 6 hours a day, but I also teach free music lessons to veterans' kids on weekends. The foundation's grown to include music therapy programs in VA hospitals, using Maxwell's pieces to help soldiers process the pain he once carried alone. Sometimes I perform in nursing homes like he used to. I always close with Moonlight Serenade, played in his altered rhythm. Most people just hear a song. But every so often, a veteran will glance up mid-phrase, catching the Morse code woven through the melody. Night music, one whispered once. You know about night music? My grandfather knew, I told him. He made sure someone would remember. That's the truth about inheritance. It's never really about money. It's about stories. About what we choose to do with what we're given. About having the courage to play the hard parts, even when your hands shake. Maxwell left me more than fortune. He left me proof that justice can take decades, but it comes, hidden in time, waiting for someone to play the right notes in the right order. For me, that moment was worth everything I lost to reach it. If you enjoyed this story, hit like, share it with someone who believes in justice and family legacies, and leave a comment if you've ever uncovered a secret from your own family's past. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories where truth finally steps out of the shadows.